You got two cards in hand, one in arsenal, and no room for error. Every block, every pitch, every life point, it's all been leading to this. The endgame in Flesh and Blood isn't just the final chapter, it's the execution of every decision you made since turn one. And trust us, one fatal misplay here, game over. All you have to do is not screw it up. Today, we're diving into those final turns, where legends are made, decks run dry, and misplays get magnified under pressure. This is the part of the game where most players think they understand, until they die holding a defense reaction and a shattered dream. Today, we're navigating endgame scenarios, the final turns, fatal misplays, where those that are punted, when those that punt becomes punished. Today, we're talking about the final turns, fatal misplays, punted and punished. Right? My name is Will.
I'm Ning.
I'm Trevor.
And before we talk about the end game, guys, what did we learn since last week?
Well, before we get into that, no fun puns today. What's happening with that?
They call all
What's
be
going
bangers.
on, bud?
Well, a lot of the puns I had, right, is it. I feel like it would have been a little too far. So,
little N17.
yeah, a little N17, right? And so I was like, you know what? Because there's a little daddy comment like punished,
Oh,
So, and then
Yeah.
I was
yeah.
thinking, how would Trevor react? And I realized I shouldn't use that as a title.
I'm glad you kept it. Glad you kept it classy.
Kept it classy.
Well, I can go first about things I learned. Gosh, I learned that Prism is a scary matchup. No matter how low you get her, it's still very scary. I've been playing Syndra for the past week, and that has been very interesting, because this is essentially the first hero that I've played that cares about chain links and combat chains, and also what kind of chain link it is, if it's draconic or not. So it's been pretty similar to Aurora, where it's obviously aggressive, but also sequencing is very important. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for me, I learned Max, or at least like the wrench Max is not all there. I bought the armory deck, wanted to try it out, trying to do the clamp press, the bank C, construct the bank breaker.
Mm-hmm.
It did not get there.
It's not it.
It wasn't even close. Any of my games, I'm not gonna lie. But I talked with Rob a bit, and he was playing Max for a few weeks before I got on it, and he seems like he's been having some luck with the Mechanoid, like kind of the old one, but not as good. So may go back at it, but I don't think the bank breaker's there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ning. One of the things though with the armory decks is sometimes they'll produce it and then they'll come up with key cards in a future expansion. It wouldn't surprise me if they finish the armory deck in something with the high seas or the set after.
Yeah, actually a little bit off track, but I've been talking with Evan a lot, and we think Puffin, we could see her getting a wrench, and then she could use some of those buffs, That could be cool.
Yeah. I feel like the wrench would be interesting, but also just in theme of using a pistol as a pirate could also be pretty in theme. So I'm very curious what her main weapon is going to be and what it is.
Yeah, I can see that. So it could be like even like with like there's some cards from the Dash IO deck that would probably be helpful too. I mean, even though it's two different concepts or play styles between the two mechs, there's definitely going to be some overlap that might translate into the new mechologist that's coming out in High Seas. So, well, what I learned is I went 1-2 with Thing, very close games, and I gotta say they were all really well played. Like, I fought a Warrior main. He was on the New Kasai deck that was piloted, that won the Battle Hardened recently. It was Chris, our local. And, it was just close. I got into one life. He was able to swing the next time and kind of get me locked later, right? But just very clean plays throughout the whole game. I don't think I really did anything incorrect. Sometimes you can do everything right and get to the end game and realize it's just whoever drew their final cards faster. Right, and that's just what happens sometimes. So, overall, I'm pretty happy with Fang. I'm thinking it was a good idea to kind of slow him down a little bit, play the mid game, try to get the value out of every one of his attacks, and trying to navigate that piece too. So, always fun. And then again, I hate to do it, but like with a new player, we have a new player that came into our meta. and he's not used to fighting warriors, and a warrior
Mhm.
is very much a new
Mhm.
player check, right? Like they just don't know what to do, right? So even though
Mhm.
I was going slow and trying to explain things to him, it's just like it's one of those things that you just have to get the loss under your belt, kind of think about and move on, and then kind of get more experience with it too. It's like the first time we
Mhm.
all fought Dory.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of that, but also when you're new, you don't know what kind of cards exist out
Mm,
of the cards that you have used, and so like for me, when I'm playing against a warrior, I can talk out loud. I mean, I know, Will, you do that too, right? You're always talking out loud, like,
hmm
oh, this could be this could be that, right? And so I do the same, and especially against warrior, where it's like, I know Hunt's End exists. What is the likelihood of you having two of them and therefore boosting your attack by what, 4 and 4 plus the 1, carry the 3, Or if it's against Kasai, it's like, okay, then at most
hmm
you if you have two cards, it's just a +3 and then a +3.
Yeah.
And what does that really mean? So yeah, definitely a knowledge check for sure.
On an aside, Ning is one of the losses I experienced this week. So at least the Tunic Counter Gamer was one. And then on an aside, Rob, our local brute slash Teklevossen player, like the guy we mentioned him several times, plays off decks,
Mm.
right? He actually took out two of the three Tunic Counter Gamers.
Yep. Yep. I got the win there, so we didn't 0-3 Rob.
That's
Okay.
good.
Oh, so you beat Rob? I thought he beat you. All right, so it was 1-1.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh. That hurts. That hurts, Will. You thought Trevor's the one who got the win? Come on now.
No, I thought he beat both of you guys because he was trying to go after me, and he's like, "Oh, we paired the final
Uh,
round." I was like, "No, I fought Ning." Anyways,
I see. That's funny. Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
all right. So now that we learned all sorts of good things, let's talk about the final turns, fatal misplays, and getting punted and punished.
Well,
Right?
before that, I want to
Oh
give a
yeah.
quick shout out. On our last episode, we had Anarchy Please just giving us great positive feedback, and just want to say we really appreciate the support on that, and just in general, if anybody, well, we're happy to hear everybody just chat in the comments, or if there's anything you want to say or want us to talk about, feel free to leave that in there, and we can put that on the agenda one day.
Sounds good. All right.
All
So
right.
talking about the end game, what is the end game in Flesh and Blood? How would we define this?
I think in my notes I kind of boiled it down to two real points. It's obviously it's the last few turns of the game, right? It's the end game, but how you can recognize when you're getting to that point is if players are low on life or you're low on cards, right? Because your cards are how you threaten the game, and your that's gone. The game's over. So those are the two things. Windows are low, and the decisions that you need to start making once you're in those states.
Yeah, I think a big when you enter the end game, you can definitely feel a shift in everybody's mindset, right? Because then, like we mentioned before, in the tempo one, depending on what phase of the game you're at, the way you start playing is very different. And so, like I mentioned before, in the skirmish when I was playing against Datadol, there were a lot of times where I had entered the end game and I didn't realize it
Hmm
because I wasn't paying attention to the board state. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm looking at their life, I'm looking at my life, and that's one indicator. But another indicator against Datadol, they start burning through their deck like a fiend. And so, and I have this problem in sealed as well, where when people's decks start getting very low, that's an end game for sure, right? Because now, even if you're an aggressive character or aggressive hero and you're playing against somebody else, the end game is, do I still try to be aggressive, or should I aggressively block because I know they're about to run out of cards?
Mm.
So I think the second point Trevor was talking about, how many cards your opponent has left, is a very important one to think about,
Yeah.
to recognize endgame has begun.
And I love how Trevor mentioned recognizing the end game because as a new player, you don't always kind of put that in the forefront of your mind Where if you know that, hey, the game's all about getting your life to total down to zero and winning the game that way, but really being aware situationally of how, how much equipment they have left, how much cards they have left, right? And then knowing that things are shifting toward the end game and knowing that that shift is happening could really kind of get you ahead. So I like how, you recognize that you have to kind of recognize that there is an end game and you're shifting from the mid game to the end game. I know me and Ning talked about several times before how we've lost just because we failed to recognize we are now entering the end game, right? Or even in my case, it's like I feel like I mess up a lot worse in the end game. I feel this immense pressure. Like I have to close this out fast because the longer it goes on, the more mistakes I'm likely to make going into the end game in this high pressure situation. So let me play a little recklessly and try to get this over as fast as possible, not realizing that, I just became a professional football player and punted it right out the window, right? So, all right.
Yeah, I mean, end games are where you feel like, because we've all had those times where like you block like defense reaction on like a 3 attack or something, and then they come in for a 4 attack right after, right? And you're like, oh, I lost like 1 point of value. But if you're at 1 life, it hurts so much more. You just have to be so critical. And I mean, it's really like kind of the same situation, because if you took that damage earlier, it's not really any different than taking it at the end, but it just hurts more.
And I know in our previous podcast, we've mentioned the in-game state in several ways. One is like our pitch deck podcast where we were talking about the order of the cards returning to your deck after cycling. And even when you start seeing these cards recur, you kind of can understand that you are now entering an end game state, most likely, if you're hitting second cycle, third cycle. But I think, again, Trevor, the biggest point you made was tempo and value, how sometimes, you really want tempo to dictate the pace, attacking versus blocking, but at the end game, right, it's really sometimes that value could become clutch. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think one thing is also in terms of value, and we'll chat about that in a bit, is if you're in an end game where you're 1-1, right? So both players have 1 health, and it's your turn. You block, and then you end up with only 1 card left. But the card that you have is a 0 for 4. Whereas, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, your opponent doesn't have any more defense reactions. Suddenly, that 0 for 4 has become so much stronger than it was earlier, right? Because now it's essentially a 0 for 6 if your opponent has to block with 2 cards instead of just 1. But we'll chat about that in a bit.
yeah. So, and Trevor, you mentioned something interesting about considering your opponent's reach. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think that's a concept it's gonna take a while to like understand it if you're a new player, right? Because every hero will have like wildly different reach, and they can have different reach just based on the style of deck they're playing. But it's just the life total that you can be at where you think where they can kill you, basically. So like against
this within
Kano,
lethal? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, when you're within lethal range, right?
Okay.
And I mean, you could apply it to your opponent, like you want to get them within your reach, but and you kind of want to try to stay out of your opponent's reach. Or if you are in their reach, you have to recognize that like you're kind of in the end game now. So I mean, if you're against like a Kano, easily they can push double digits, right? If you let them keep the full hand. If you go shields down, like you pitch every card so you can't AB anything. Like that's a mistake everyone makes at least once, and you get punished because the Kano does a million things and nukes you for like 30.
Yeah.
The worst thing that they could say is how many cards in hand? None. Nothing on the pitch. And you just throw down you're like, I'm done. And he's like, okay. That's how I lost to Burdens recently. They cracked the boots. Anyways. But go on. This is interesting. All right.
Yeah, so like Wizards, I think, is a good example for reach because they definitely have the tallest reach and they can do it on your turn and stuff. But like different heroes will have like reach in different ways. I feel like Azalea and Guardians come in mind because their reach I feel like can be like 5, 6, 7 damage, but it's also dominated, right? A lot of the time. So it's like this preventable kind of thing. So you have to be kind of prepared, right? And you would want to keep like defense reaction in arsenal or something to like try to counter these like overpowers and dominates that they're going to be trying to send at you. And yeah, I mean, there's other examples as well if you guys want to go over some of them, but I could, yeah.
Well, I know, like, I'll speak from Fang's perspective currently, right? Because really, if you are ever in 1 or 2 life, we effectively call it Kodachi locked because of the famous Kodachis. But you're giving up cards, and I could always sidestep it. So I could swing, and then no matter what you block, I could probably go over the top or sidestep and swing again with another dagger. So effectively, if you are within 4 life, you're within my reach effectively because you just don't know if I can come over the top for that much. And there's certain cards, if you, depending on how you pitched or what's in your graveyard, you said Hunt's End, that's a +4 reaction. Effectively, it makes my attack a 6 attack, right? And so if my opponent's not prepared for that, then they block with 3 cards. I could just go over the top with 3 more points and then have my second dagger come in and go over the top again. So effectively, I could even reach further than that. So, and that's just really like the sidestep mechanic. I know Fang does that really well.
Yeah, Fang's an annoying endgame, right? Because if you're sitting
Annoying
there with
to
no
you.
defense. Yeah, right. Because I mean, they come at you, right? And if you don't have a defense reaction, you can like block 6 on the first attack. They just like, play the Tooth of the Dragon or whatever, and they sidestep, and now you're like, oh no, because they're going to be coming in for even taller on the second one.
And then
I also I think one of the, I guess, newbie stomp reaches that you always forget is against brutes, right? With reckless swing.
Yeah,
where 2 damage just kind of comes in on your own turn, and so whenever you go down to 2 damage or 2 life left, it's always a scary time. So yeah.
Generally speaking, when I play Brute against a new player, I always show them, hey, this is a card you have to keep in mind going into the end game, right? And that way, it just doesn't feel like a gotcha. Heck, you mentioned Prism earlier. Prism even has something that could deal damage on your opponent's turn with one that does
perils or whatever, something or other.
It's like you pitted out the thing and it does 1 arcane damage, and then you can transform it and swing and does 2 more arcane damage.
Oh yeah, one of the figments.
Figment of War or Ravages, maybe.
It could be Ravages. That sounds right.
That sounds correct.
Maybe.
But
yep.
And Trevor, you mentioned mech. Right? How did what's mech's reach? Like you were on Dash.io and you played Max. I know they have completely different end games.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess like for Dio specifically, her reach is kind of like nuts. It can vary a lot because I mean she goes super wide and then she sometimes has boom grenade off the top and then you deal 4 extra damage. So I mean you could consider her reach to always be like an extra 4 damage whenever you let something hit. Because if she just pulls the boom grenade off the top of the deck, that's more damage, right? So I just thought that was like kind of a weird one that's like varies a lot, But yeah, I mean they go super wide, so you just kind of they don't really have like reactions to like buff an attack, right? So it's pretty face up damage. But if they boost, something else is going to come after, so you kind of have to like plan your turn around that, right? Like if you throw like. You wouldn't want to block like 2 cards on like a 5 attack go again, right? Because something else is probably coming in afterwards, so you get more value if you just like 3 block.
Yeah, and I know assassins probably have the more irritating reach than any other class I know of, and that's me saying it from a Fang sub player because especially with the daggers, I know our local Tommy Siblings in Cardboard podcast. He's loving his Mario, and he loves how he could swing for 14 damage, draw a card, make them discard a card, all sorts of banana stuff. And so they're really swinging tall. And it's after you declare blocks is how many more reactions he can put on top of that with his dagger, right? And that's always seems fairly irritating because no matter how many D reacts you have, is it enough? So you always got to respect it when you get below, 10 life at least, maybe even more. So.
Yeah, and that's where like I think threat density comes into play. Like you want to be looking through their graveyard and see what they have left, right? Like if they have no more tarantula toxins, then you're safe from that. Yeah. But yeah, if like you're not using like that information, like it can feel like a lot more frustrating than it really is.
So when you're getting to the end game and you recognize that, would you guys say a good method just to get into the habit of is looking at your opponent's graveyard?
Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Yeah, I think whenever you start to be cognizant of like, oh, how many cards does this guy play of this one card that I'm scared of? It's definitely you've definitely reached a stage of a game where your mindset has now changed.
Yeah, and I can't remember which one of you guys said there's a change in value analysis. Right. I know I mentioned it earlier with the Gadachi lock and where it's really. Which one of you guys were mentioning earlier?
I think that was Ning.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah. What about
Ning?
it?
Do you want to explain it for our audience? Well, you're keeping them in suspense.
Yeah. Well, I think just this was something that I actually had heard from Thomas when he was explaining it to our new player, the one that Will bullied. So basically, we were kind of saying, or he was kind of saying how, again, in that situation where your opponent has only one health left, and as a Syndra player, right, the tools at my expense are my 2 daggers and all the cards in my hand, right? So from a value perspective, my dagger technically only deals 1 damage, right? I use a blue, or I pitch a blue, poke with a dagger. It's coming at you for 1 damage. However, when you're at 1 life, the value of that 1 poke suddenly increases exponentially, right? Because from a nominal standpoint, yes, it's 1 damage, but from the value that your opponent has to give up, suddenly it's a 2, 3, 4 value. They block with a Codex of Frailty. That probably feels like a 6 value that you just gained, right? A Codex of Frailty can give your opponent a free card. It can give them Ponder, which is another free card. It gives you Frailty next turn. And so the value, the way you look at value, I think changes a lot depending on where you are in the game. So from just the average standpoint where we were talking about, on average, how much value should a card give you? The answer we provided before was 3, right? So you poke with 1 dagger, they block with 1 card. Oh, that's 3 value right there, not just 1. You poke with another dagger, they block with another card. That's an extra 3 value. And you just pitched 1 card to do 6 damage. 6. Interesting, but also something to look out for when you're going through the end game, where like I said, the mentality shifts, and therefore and part of that mentality shift is how much should I actually value the swing from my opponent?
Yeah, I know it's always tricky too because against certain decks, getting down to 1 life, especially if the weapons or some of their other cards hit just for 1 life, that's where you're getting value, and that's where Fang really does become a heavily valued deck toward the end game because he's making your opponent overblock or blocking correctly, and I think that's most Warriors' game plan, anyways. All right, while they're retaining value from their armor, and we'll talk about armor and how that plays into the end game later. This is also one of my biggest mistakes, so that's a little precursor, right? So, anything else you guys want to talk about as far as this before we move on to the next topic as far as reach goes and change of value?
Nothing too crazy. I think this is definitely one of those knowledge checks again, but just kind of sort of easy to remember in the way of once you've either experienced it or if you looked at it, you always will. It's always something to keep in mind, right? So generically, Brute's reach is always a 2 because of that reckless swing. Wizards, you always want to make sure you have a healthy amount of HP just because they can do things on your turn and suddenly that hurts, things like that. But yeah, it's definitely an important thing to know as you play more and more different decks.
Yeah. If we want to go on to, so that's kind of like the life total end game, right? Is where you need to start really considering reach because that's how the game's going to end in that state. The other one is when you start running out of cards. That's kind of like a fatigue one, but some decks do this much better than others. The ones that I kind of listed, I think Ninja is really good here. They kind of do it with the life total as well because they'll get you into that Kodachi lock, and they'll do the one, you give away 2 cards, and then you only have 2 cards to play back at them. And if they block well, that's not really a winning situation for you. If you can do that every turn, you'll just run out of cards eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also put in that New is really good at taking away your threats by banishing cards, right? And she can, activate New. All of the stealth on hits banish, the contract cards banish from the top of your deck. And the daggers too can get you into the kind of that Kodachi lock, right? If she has enough resources, I mean, they cost more, but if they're still coming in for one, you're gonna have to be blocking those.
Yeah.
And she has the Nightmare's Mask, right? That can also
Yeah, true.
vastly
Right.
irritating as far as
Yeah, very irritating.
Yeah, that's why you get into a point where they have to block with it, and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
I love seeing them block with this. It's my least favorite card, I think, maybe.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I mean, towards the late game, you're just going to be playing with a 3-card hand if they have this up, because they will just have the cheat.
Yeah.
And I think to your point back to the ninja with Kodachi lock, I think another item or equipment to be wary of is always that mask of momentum, right? Where you'll always see your opponent block with something at least one time to kind of disrupt that momentum, if you will, so you don't end up drawing the extra card. So that's yeah.
Well, that's also the skill check too when you move to the end game too, because they'll do the mask momentum, and then if they have flick knives and it's not triggered, they'll try to continue the chain by flicking the knife on the time to extend that chain out. So there's a little bit of that play too. So, but and then again, you see flick knives, you can't go to one life against anyone that has flick knives, because how many times have I've lost to something like that, where it's just like, oh, they just look at the flick and like I could just,
Actually,
punish.
I would assume, I think against Syndra specifically, you probably consider 2 being that number,
Yeah.
right? Because you have regular flick knives and you also have throw dagger. And then you also have blood runs deep, which throws the dagger for free anyway. So the Syndra has a lot of that quote unquote free damage.
Yeah. So if you get within that reach and it's like lethal with just a very, very, very few minor setups on the opponent's side, then you have to close out the game probably within a turn, if not 2 turns, or else you're going to end up losing. That's you do everything perfectly and you're still falling within 1 to 2 life, right? If it's a Syndra, if it's against Katsu, if he's still relevant, even with Fang, you're going to really have to have an ability to push through that last bit of damage and end the game there.
Yeah.
But it's also the tricky point because that's also a skill check as you get more experience. Because how many times have I lost due to overextending? That means I don't like to get to the end game against another experienced player because their experience really shines in this. Some people very cold, meticulous, and they can usually just play it out, very methodical, and keep their nice and calm. But me, I'm like struggling, I'm sweating. I'm like, oh man, I really need to end this, right? And so then I overextend, and again, they come through and they severely punish me and crush my dreams, right?
Yeah.
Normally when I first started and I was playing brutes, this would look like using scab skins when I didn't have to do it because I was ahead, and I wanted to really just kind of close out the game a little bit quicker. I was like, you know what? I just need one extra action point. Let me roll scab skins, and what that ended up doing effectively was tanked all my momentum, my tempo, and then I just lost the game on the spot because I rolled a 1. Right? When all I had to do was keep on playing my game plan, not worry about overextending or doing something, in my opinion, kind of stupid. So, there's always a saying amongst brute players that we lose the games ourselves by rolling scabs. Right? And guess what? When I stopped rolling scabs to get further ahead when I was already ahead, I started winning more games. So,
surprise.
Crazy.
Surprise.
And everyone was telling you that for months. And you still rolled.
Yeah, they were like, so how do you do tonight? Oh, I lost scab skins. And like, yeah, we've told you. So
Wild.
That's funny.
Yeah, so you don't really want to do a risky play that could throw away a good lead when your opponent's on the rope, and that's like rolling scab skins. Do you guys have any other examples of this?
I mean, I think it's I think like even within an aggro deck, right? It's interesting because let's say I'm doing damage after damage after damage, and then I see that my opponent doesn't block at all. The question then becomes, should I arsenal so maybe my next turn can be even more explosive, or should I just go ahead and push all the damage right now because I have this opportunity? Um, and I mean, I personally don't have a good feel for when I should arsenal or when I should just go ahead and push that damage. Because maybe it's just a setup turn, or maybe they are about to do something super explosive too. Um, so like against Prism, right? It's kind of, well, should I go ahead and push all that damage, or should I kind of, for one reason or another, be prepared that 10,000 heralds are coming from heavens and attacking me, going into their own soul and bringing out figments of imaginations, right? Like,
These aren't actually real cards to the audience. He's being hyperbolic, but it's pretty funny because we've all been in that prison matchup. We all know. We've all been touched bad by the angels before, right? So it's funny. And it is one of those things where you don't really want to, like the whole Arsenal thing to go that explosive turn. It really is going back to Trevor's point is how much life do you have? Because I know it's my fear when I see them keeping cards in their hand. Like the worst feeling in the world is I take it, I take it, I take it, right? And they go down to one life. That means they're going to swing back hard enough where it's either going to take your hand or drop you out of the game, right? And that's always my fear too. It's like when they're taking all this damage and they have the life and they're using it as a final bit of resource to kind of get that tempo back. And they have three cards, and it's especially scary if they could go especially tall and they have a lot of relevant on hits, right? So it's always a bad feeling, right?
Yeah, and like going back to the overextending, like if you take this damage, go down to 1 because you think you can kill him, and then you don't get there, then you
it
put
feels
yourself to 1.
so
Yeah,
bad.
right. Like that's pretty brutal. And this
Yeah.
you could never do that against like brute, right? Like if you go down to 1 or 2 to like because you think you're gonna kill them next turn, and then they live, and then they have reckless next turn.
Yep.
It sucks, but
You better hope you have 2 calming
yeah.
breezes on your own turn.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
So in your previous games, was there anything that was like kind of an end game where you you punted, didn't realize it was an end game, you misplayed? Or like, was there anything that happened in like any other, in your games with your other heroes?
No, just play perfectly. Gosh, I don't.
And
This is so as Syndra, right? If you bring up her card, her ability is for each. So for 3 resources, you can bring back your daggers from the graveyard, and for each draconic chain, it costs 1 less. So effectively, if you have 3 draconic links on your combat chain, you can bring your daggers back for free. One thing that I have experienced as part of the end game is I can't get my daggers back. Like even if I have 1 dagger that's still there, I have to block for whatever reason, avoid on hits or something or other, and I end up in my own little kunai lock, if you will, on myself, where I'm too scared to swing that dagger because I don't have enough draconic links to be able to bring my daggers back. And so I've definitely ended up in that situation where for like 3-4 turns, I can't swing with the dagger, otherwise I'll be daggerless. But I can't flick it to extend because again, I'll be daggerless, or I'm just not able to bring it back, and I can only, bring out 1 or 2 draconic chain links. So that was always something. That's something I definitely need to work on, or figure out how important it is towards that period of the game.
when I was on Vincent, this is a common where against a lot of experienced players, if they know I'm playing a defensive type of Vincent, but I still have to swing and develop all those rune chants, then the more experienced players will look at my deck and start blocking and defending early and try to deck me
Mhm.
out, right?
Yeah.
Inexperienced players will go ahead and keep on playing the game as normal, and they'll allow me to push damage through because they're still playing the game, right? So, and this is a good example of like when your experience comes in and like I'm swinging, it's like, well, I'm down to 4 cards in my deck, and against a new player, I'm closing it out within that last 1 or 2 turns. Against an experienced player that sees the kind of deck I'm running, because it's very red line, not a lot of build up, just swing in like 9 damage at a turn, usually with the six attack and then the 3 moon chance, right? But that's very, I'm using a lot of cards to get this consistent damage through, and a lot of people could usually block enough of that. So then I go a little extra wide with some of the rune blade cards they have where they can make their chain go a little bit wider, but still it's not enough to close it out if they started blocking earlier and forcing me to give up my cards. Because again,
Mhm.
if you don't have a great weapon, guess what? You're probably going to end up decking yourself, right? At least in my experience. Like, so Guardians maybe a little less of this part because they can always pitch their weapon, swing with something that deals 4 damage, right? And they can keep that pressure up.
Mhm.
But for a hero that doesn't have a lot of great weapons, then fatigue is really a possible avenue of victory.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Weapons are very, very important, right? Because I mean, any hero, like all the rangers, illusionists, like their weapons don't do anything on their own, right? You need to use cards with them in order to actually push any damage.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just a strict disadvantage that they have versus like Guardian or whoever.
Or other
Ninja.
classes. Yeah.
Yeah, who have a weapon that they can just pitch to every turn, keep cards in deck.
Yeah. When you were playing Dash, because wasn't Dash a
Mhm.
very easily fatigable hero? Like, wasn't that one of the strategies against Dash
Mhm.
IO? Was just block her out and let her fatigue herself?
Yeah, that's still a really good strategy into her. Like if you start that game and you just block everything, it can be pretty tough if you're on all the defense reactions and stuff.
Mm.
And if you're not, you have to like kind of have that mindset, which is something that I didn't always have when I started playing. Like I was just trying to like gas them as quick as I could and not really setting anything up because I just thought like I've killed other people, like I can do it here. But if you block good, it can be pretty hard to get your damage over the top. And when you're boosting, you lose 2 cards from your deck, right? You lose the card that you played and then the card from your deck. So every time you do an action, you're losing 2 cards. When if your opponent blocks, they just lost the one.
And I think another thing to point out too is even if you're low and they're low, at some point you as in Dash IO, you're probably going to lose because your opponent probably can pitch into their weapon to poke you, whereas Dash IO cannot. She has her Steam counters, and then she can shoot for free, but that's it. She can't pitch into more things or keep shooting after her Steam counters run out.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. There's decks out there that just have like a limited amount of damage in them. Like Dash IO is one of those, right? Like, you can play all your items, you can swing your pistol a bunch of times if you swing for every item in the deck, but after that you won't have anything. There's no
and it's just like Syndra too, right? Because even if, let's say, the last card that's in your deck is a blue, you can swing a dagger, maybe flick one of the daggers to bring one back. But if you lose that blue card, then you're done. Or if you lose flick knives, then you're done. You just because you'll lose your weapon.
You can kind of recur it, right? If you have one in the graveyard, one in the field, you swing with it with the blue, and then you buy back.
Yeah, but if you end up in a I suppose yeah. So basically, So basically, you either poke one and then bring one back with your blue, or you poke with both, end your turn. On your opponent's turn, draw a card, and then pass, and now you have 2 daggers, and then you can try it again. But I think it's definitely very difficult to do.
Well, it does bring up a good point, and I think this is part of the end game conversation is you should be able to identify your closers, and then it's even more beneficial if you know your opponents. I think that's where a lot of new players struggle with is how does my opponent kill me, Right now, that's
Mhm.
most of the time people are saying, well, they just deal damage, right? Yes, if you're trying to be cheeky, sure. But it's really how are they dealing the damage to you? Because that's, what cards are they going to use? What cards do they need to keep in deck? What cards do you want to see them lose when they're blocking, right? I know you mentioned this before the cast, but like with Fang, Hunt's End it's a pretty good card for Fang, and he really needs it if he's going long to kind of close out the game. It's one of his power cards. If you block with this and you are going into the second cycle, or if you're trying to go over the top of, like, let's say a Guardian's block or another hero's block, then you really need to keep these cards and really kind of stack them on for the second cycle. And ideally, what you do is you have two of these come up at the same time, so it can really push that damage through, right? With the other combo cards. Right? But if I have to block with this, then I'm kind of disrupting my end game win condition. It's going to be a lot harder to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in our game during the armory, right? We were basically in the end game, and the question that I asked was, what happens if you have Hunt's Ends, right? And then do I need to block this? What is the likelihood that you have two of them? And I think I don't remember if I blocked at all or if I maybe just blocked with one card, and that was technically a risky play for me to push whatever my damage was.
You blocked enough knowing that I had two cards in the graveyard. One I blocked with earlier, one card I used on you, and you were within lethal or within reach of me killing if I had a Hunt's End. You're like, the chances of you having it in the cards that are left, I'm calling BS.
Yeah.
Block.
Hey,
right?
and it worked.
It did.
Worked.
It's what one.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do sometimes.
Yeah. So really, identify your win condition. If you don't know what your deck's win condition is, ask a more experienced player if you need to, or just really think about it, right? Because every deck has power cards. Trevor, not to bring up a bad point, but what was Max Nitro's power card in your deck?
In the one I brought on Tuesday, like kind of nothing. I thought it was.
You're just hoping like your opponent.
Bring in a more experienced player, Trevor. Talk to them. Figure out what the win
honestly, well, Rob did give me good advice actually.
Okay, well there you go.
Maxed recently more than me. He said he was having luck with the Mechanoid, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's a 3/6 attack and it has overpower, which is evasion. And I mean, you just do that on top of like the normal shenanigans you're doing with like boosting, going super wide. You just end with 6 overpowered for like 7 or 8 turns or however many times you can just swing with it. Like that probably just gets you there better. I mean, the wrench thing. I wanted to try
it. I guess when you sit down in front of your opponent and praying for their imminent demise is not a one strategy you want to hold in flesh and blood, right? So, actually, God, you don't want to use that as a win condition, right?
Yeah. I mean, the plan was to play Gigawatts and then banish a card from under the Bank Breaker so it has overpower and you come in for like 9 or something. But we didn't get to that point.
Sorry to hear it, man. But it's brave for you to try it because I know you were talking about it. So
yeah, it was still fun though. It's a cool deck.
So let's talk about a couple myths and misconceptions, if you would. If you are lower in life in the end game, you will lose.
I keep bringing Prism up, but she's such a good example, or Kano for that matter.
Yeah, that's good too.
But Prism. I was playing against Paul, local top 8 in Battle Hardened Prism player.
Oh yeah, refer back to our episode where we brought in the goat. That's Paul.
That's right. Bring him back the goat. I was playing against him as Syndra, and I had 31 health, and he only had. I pushed him all the way down to 1. And then he did some Prism nonsense and got us down to 1-1. And the only reason why I won was because I had enough 1 pokes and dagger flings of some kind. So but like, don't ever think that if you got Prism down to a low health that you're winning, because that was a scary crawl.
Trevor, I know you hate when I repeat myself. What do I always say about Prism?
Wait, I don't know.
Remember the last episode? I kept on saying it like the only good Prism is a dead Prism. Anyways, and it's because of situations like that. In all reality, they have a really strong end game. Doesn't matter the life totals because they have enough tools in their toolkit at the end game to get you down from 30 plus life to 0,
Mhm.
because their end game is so strong and offensive. It's hard to punch through sometimes,
Yep.
especially if you start going through. And
Yep.
And
I
yeah,
think
sorry.
go ahead, Trevor.
I'm sorry. The prism at 1 life is like very disingenuous because if they have like 4 figments up, each of
Right.
those is like 4 life, so
Exactly.
like they're at 1 for like 5 turns, but they've gained like 16 off of these things,
Right. And I think the only reason why I won was because I was able to poke in such a way that the angels did not get the full 4 value
Yeah,
from
yeah.
their ward. Right. And then also just to push it back, Kano's whole thing is also he just explodes, right? And we were talking about him having a really big reach, more so than other people, just because of how wizards inherently are. And so, and I think what Florian is now also popular with OTK 1 turn kill Florians now. So
Yeah.
just because you have 48 life doesn't mean anything. You have to count the number of root chants they have.
It's true.
Yeah,
It's
so I
all
think
about board state.
I do think that this myth is busted, right? It doesn't matter about the life totals. It does matter how much control and your deck's end game potential, and how you're closing it out, your power cards, all this stuff. So yeah. And I know we mentioned this slightly previous, but you need to try to Arsenal to get ahead on value. Arsenals can win you in the end game.
Yeah, I don't know. I think generally speaking, having an arsenal gives you the advantage of having a 5-card hand, right? But if you end up in a situation where, let's say, you arsenaled a blue card that costs 2 to use, the likelihood of it leaving the arsenal is probably very slim. And therefore, all you've really done is locked yourself in a situation where you will always have a 4-card hand. And that can lose you the game sometimes as well.
I know sometimes I try to be cute and I'll Arsenal card like a blue card that does absolutely nothing for me at the end game. And usually it's kind of brutes. Like they have a lot of 3 cost cards that you really shouldn't put in the arsenal because it's not really good for your cost curve. And then I'm always thinking like, hey, I'm trying to mind game my opponent into making a mistake. That's a cute play. It does not work most of the time. I don't recommend it because then you draw your D reactor and you're like, shit. I wish I had the arsenal space to clear this out.
So you can block the dominates or whatever, right?
Right. And you just kind of stuck yourself with the arsenal card and you're making a bad play later. So yeah, I think you're right. It depends on your deck. It depends on what the arsenal card is, right? Sometimes it's a good play, right? If you can afford to take off the turn to put a little bit of pressure, but then land you a great arsenal for future play. But I don't think it's like you get that 5th card in the arsenal, or you get that card in the arsenal for a 5-card hand. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win, right?
Yeah, and like something that I experienced a lot when I was running an extremely redline Uzuri is you play your cards and suddenly you have a 2-cost 6 card left over. So what do? Well, more likely than not, you're just going to arsenal it, right? So you can draw 4 more cards. But the problem with that is, with the way that Uzuri's deck works, you can't really use your arsenal card unless you have a tunic, or unless your tunic has three counters on it, and you're able to just pitch 1 card, and that's a very difficult position to get to. So yeah, it's just because you have an arsenal doesn't mean you're gonna win.
Yeah,
TLDR.
Yep.
Trevor, any final points on this, or
No, I agree with y'all point. I agree with your guys' points.
Yeah, just arsenal in a smart way. Do better.
Yeah. 100%. Don't do what I do, guys. Don't try to mind game your opponent. They're smart.
Don't try to make me think that it's a reckless swing. It's going to come out at some point.
Yep. All right. So, how about practical takeaways? Anything you guys want to chime in as we're kind of going toward the end game of this podcast?
Nice.
There it is. There's the pun.
At least one.
I think. I think this takeaway is the same takeaway I've always been giving, which is just recognize the board state better. Realize when you are in the end game, and if you're able to at least understand that there has been a shift in the what's the English word for it, the mood of the situation, you'll definitely be able to navigate navigate the game a little better.
Yeah. I think another one I wrote down was a good thing you can do is like recognize what could be better for you in the end game, like once you're already in there, right? So if you were like, man, if I had like one more armor block right now, that would like really just save me the game here. And then you remember back where you just threw an armor like arbitrarily on something just to save a life earlier, right? You know, like could make a difference there, right? So just so you can like kind of retroactively like think of your plays and then make better ones in the future.
Trevor, I know you mentioned that before, but I cannot stress for any of the new players out there, and honestly, even veteran players, the way you use your armor, right, to really navigate toward the end game or at the end game, it really is. It's not just about tempo. It's really about survival or lethal setup. Like that extra value you're getting on your armor from blocking it
Mm-hmm.
could give you that one extra turn to kind of swing back. New players tend to use their armor earlier than later because it's the easiest thing to give up, but they don't realize the lasting value that armor has, especially when you
Mm-hmm.
get to the end game. And how many times have we lost at the end game because we blocked too early with our armor, and then we had nothing to really kind of mitigate the four block or the four attack when we were at one life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you mentioned this now twice or three times. Where think back on the games you played. Did I use the armor effectively at every point of the game, or should I have held it toward the state where it really
Mm-hmm.
mattered, right?
Yeah.
Like I think if you get into that kind of practice, right, that intent, then I think you'll learn more and more when you should use armor. And I think that's how you kind of really learn your deck.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I love that point. So and then I always say your end game plan starts at turn one, and this is something I'm so bad at. But in talking
Mm,
with you guys in the weeks we've been doing this podcast, it kind of made me realize that you could really lose the game earlier on and not even realize it until you're at the end game and you realize, oh, I made a misplay. It kind of is coming back up to me. It could be the way you were pitching, it could be the armor we used early. So really,
Mm-hmm.
your end game planning could start at turn one, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I always use this. Life is a resource. I quote this all the time. I was like, hey,
Hmm.
and actually Reinar loves this too because Reinar could get cards at your hand, but really Reinar's endgame is kind of weak comparatively, but he has such usually a life lead on other players that he can use his life as a resource, go no blocks, and then swing back with, you know, a large turn. Usually it's a Blood Rush Bellow turn with, a four card grip and your equipment. And that you do that because you have such a life lead. Right? So you can use life as a resource in order to set up your end game too. Like, hey, no blocks, take it all. Or in Prism's case, she starts at 32 life, goes down to one
Hmm.
life, doesn't care because she has
Hmm.
four figments, which are each ward
Hmm.
four, right? And as an aside, Jagged
Mm-hmm.
Edge is so funny when
Oh,
that happens.
oh, I bet it
because
is. I
because
bet it
that is how I
is.
killed Paul twice.
No, that's funny. I bet it is. Golly.
But
I went through February and double checked to see if there was any way to get preventable damage. Nope.
it's
Not for
it's a warrior
ninjas.
exclusive, right?
Yeah, warriors can do it and
You
assassins can
got
do it.
Tiger Stripe Shuko. That one works.
For just to poke a little bit more, a little harder.
It makes it unpreventable as well.
Oh, it
Is
does.
it?
You,
Yeah.
Oh, is that
I
a
think like
thing?
some Syndras have been on like a double strike and stuff now. Just because
look
it's
at that.
Hold
yeah.
on,
Yep.
hold
Damage
on.
that
Are
we've
we
been dealt by
learning?
this can't be prevented.
Oh,
Mhm.
snap. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Ain't
I'm
that a
not sure how
thought?
great Syndra uses it
I
right
don't
now
think
with the
it'd be
current
very
build,
good, but
but
it is interesting, absolutely.
yeah,
Well,
I
that
like
would be
Yeah.
Syndra.
great for Ira against a Prism, right? So
Yeah.
maybe.
It has to be the attack action card if you have
Yeah.
to play a lot of little ones. I think only really Fi does that right now. It
Ah,
probably could
Strikes.
though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Syndra runs what? The cindering yellows. So hey, you got those. One
Maybe.
day. You play two back to
It's a 2 block too. It's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, going back to not that one.
No.
I don't remember what it's called. Some Cinder Claw or some Cinder's
I
Cinder
Branded
got you.
Cinder
something.
Claw.
Cinder Brand. Yeah, something like that. But going back to the life as a resource, like I was playing against Nate who's playing Kasai.
Wait,
And
Nate's on Kasai now? I thought he was on Dory.
Yeah, I think he's going on Kasai right now, kind of as a
Mm.
flavor. And then he just trying to test her out. And so when I was going through that matchup, I have this bad mindset against Kasai's where it's like, oh, there's no on hit. It's just damage. We'll just take it and then we'll go and push it. But like, and so that's I kind of carried that mentality with me in his game where most times he was attacking me, I would just let it hit because, as a Syndra, as an aggressive, an aggro deck, I also want to just go, right? But when there are the on-hit coppers or gold at stake, then suddenly I care a little bit more, and then I'll try to block that out. So
Yeah.
I also definitely take life as a resource very to heart. Yeah.
And again, for our newer players, when they have copper and it's Kasai, that's relevant for blood on her hands. And the gold is just for them to cycle their deck and get her swords online faster.
Yeah, or
right?
they can get the little ally too if they run that.
That's true. I have not seen that, but that's going to be a surprise, right? Definitely a in-game play to extend it out longer if they're going to not go to the fatigue state. All right.
Absolutely.
So, in the final turns of Flesh and Blood, every decision from your pitch stack to your block timing can mean the difference between victory and a game-losing misplay. Endgame mastery requires knowing your deck's reach, reading your opponent's resources, and resisting the urge to overextend. Whether you're up on life or down to 1, it's not about who has more health, it's about who plays the game better. Now, before we end this and close it out, does anyone have any final points?
No, I think I got everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think I'm good too.
And for our audience, if you have a special point where you got to the end game and you punted it away, share those stories down below, because we could always like to know that we're not the only knuckleheads that does that. No, I'm just joking. But let's wrap it up. Remember,
I do.
we have so many stories, right? It's a learning podcast. I have to throw that in there, right? If you haven't punted at least once in your career, then have you ever been really playing Flesh and Blood? So,
Honestly.
I mean, experienced players still fun. But anyways, remember, every turn is a decision, every decision is a story, and don't forget your damn Tunic Counter. Peace.
See you next time.